I'm Alan Press.
I'm Karen Nadoff.
And we're partners at Shire Law Group in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And this is a presentation that's near and dear to our heart. Not only are we University of Illinois parents as well, but we've been doing this program for a lot of students that are graduating from high school and heading into college, or maybe heading into their first job, and making sure that they have these documents in place. So we're very excited to be with you today to present this topic.
So if you have any questions, again, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. We don't get to them right away. It's because we're probably going to get to that topic shortly. We will make sure that we get to all your questions. We will also stay on as long as need be to make sure all the questions are answered. If following the presentation you think of a question, feel free to call us. We like getting questions. We want everyone to understand this topic. You can call us at 847-955-9000, or feel free to email us at Karen@CAREN@ShireLawGroup.com and Alan, ALAN@ShireLawGroup.com.
And with that, I think we're ready to get started. So again, if you have questions, use that Q&A feature, and we'll monitor those occasionally and attempt to answer them contemporaneously with the subjects that we're approaching today.
So some of you have children that are about to turn 18. Some of you have children who have also turned 18, and you're joining us this afternoon because your children are going to be heading off shortly to college. So congratulations to all of those who have those graduating seniors. So some of your children are headed off, like we said, to college. They're graduating. Some of your children are going to be traveling. Some of your children might be starting a new job as well, and some of your children might be moving. And most likely, it's a combination of a few of these things. But one thing that we all have in common, and no matter what direction our children are heading in, is that once they turn 18, they are considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some important changes for them, for you, and for your family as a whole. And this chart demonstrates some of those changes. So before 18, you can access your child's medical records. So if you had a question about your child's vaccination history, you could call up to your doctor's office. You could inquire as to what vaccines had been given, what might be outstanding that needs to be given. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child slipped and fell, or they were injured during playing a sport or a game, you could go to the doctor's office with your child and make the decision about how their medical treatment was going to ensue. And after 18, that rate changes. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. So if your child wasn't feeling well, you could call up the doctor's office, speak with the doctor, speak with the nurse. You could relay the symptoms, and you could work with the nurse or the doctor as to a course of treatment. And after 18, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you can help your child with finances. So if your child had a bank account in their name and they were confused about one of the statements, you could call up the bank on their behalf, and you could try to work that out and figure out what was going on. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could also access your child's educational records. And after 18, the ability to do that also is altered, and we'll talk about that as well. So what is a parent to do? That's why we're here this afternoon. We're going to talk to you about healthcare and financial powers, the 3 essential documents that should be put in place for your adult children. We're also going to talk about FERPA, and FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So that governs access to educational records. We'll spend some time on that this afternoon. And then, as Alan said, we've done this presentation throughout the community. And when we do it in the past, we've had people come to us and they have additional concerns. And we wanted to bring those to you proactively this afternoon. So we're going to touch on wills and trusts. Alan will talk about that, as well as access to digital assets. And then I'm going to discuss dorm, apartment, and global insurance, as well as health and safety apps. But first, we're going to get started with those 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. Those 3 documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each of these and discuss them individually. And we'll start out with that healthcare power of attorney. A parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless prior authorization has been put in place. That prior authorization is the healthcare power of attorney. That healthcare power of attorney gives parents or designated individuals authority to make medical decisions on an adult child's behalf. So very importantly, and we get this question all the time, especially from an adult child, this does not take away that adult child's right to make their own medical decisions. It doesn't supersede any of their rights, but it becomes especially important in the event that your adult child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions. And then this healthcare power of attorney names who may step in to make those decisions at that point. The healthcare power of attorney avoids the expense and aggravation of potentially having to go to court to get a guardianship, to have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf. In the midst of a crisis, that's the last thing you want to be worrying about. You want to be able to deal with the crisis that's going on at that point, not have to worry about going to court, the expense, the time, the aggravation that accompanies that. So my friend had a daughter who was going to a large university. It was her first time away from home. And she thought that it would be a good idea to help her daughter acclimate, to recommend that she join an intramural group. And that's what she did. So it was going great. The first week, she was meeting people. She was getting used to her new home and her new surroundings. And at the end of that week, she was on a field and she collided with another one of her teammates. And she was injured very badly. This landed her in university health services, and she was in a new environment with new doctors. She was in an immense amount of pain. She didn't understand what was being told to her. She didn't understand what the doctors and the nurses were relaying. Fortunately, my friend had a power of attorney for healthcare in place for her. So they were able to send the power of attorney for healthcare directly to that University Health Services center and make some important decisions on behalf of her child. So had she not had that in place, that would have been a very different scenario. So it's extremely important to put these documents in place. You never know when you need them. Hopefully you don't need them, but when you do, it's relatively easy and you'll be very happy that at a click of a button, you can send them out. When we do these documents for our clients, we do electronic copies of all of these documents. And when you have these documents done, you should keep them electronically, and you should keep them in a place that you can easily access them, because when you need them, you want to get to them right away and be able to send them off. Electronic copies are just as good as originals and copies.
We have a couple of questions, Karen, before we move on. One is, do you have to fill out the forms every year? How long do the forms last? The good news is no, they don't have an expiration. So they would be good during the entire 4-year tenure, hopefully 4 years, right, for most, at University of Illinois and beyond, right? So they don't expire. They could be used while the young adult is at college. They could be used afterwards. It can be revoked by doing a new one. And typically a young adult is going to want to do a new one when they have a major life change, like, they have a significant other or they get married. They may want to replace maybe parents and put in their spouse. So that's a normal time to do a new one. But the documents do not expire. And there's one other question. Aren't parents considered to be next of kin? Well, that would be true, but that doesn't mean that you have these certain rights that Karen pointed out would be abridged once your child turns 18. Illinois does have a surrogacy law. So if these documents aren't in place, there is a statute that states which people can make decisions, and parents, of course, would be at the top of that list. But those decisions would be limited without having the power of attorney form created. So it's a big advantage to having the form, because as a parent, you're going to have complete rights to be able to make decisions for your young adult, as opposed to relying on the surrogacy law, which is going to be limited in that scope.
So we'll switch over now to the second essential document. So that's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, otherwise known as HIPAA, and your HIPAA authorization. So HIPAA allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with who's ever designated on that HIPAA authorization. So in paragraph 1 of the HIPAA authorization, there's authorized recipients, meaning who can call up that hospital and get information about what's going on. The HIPAA authorization allows doctors to speak about a student or an adult child's medical condition with whomever is designated in that HIPAA authorization, and they are then authorized by that adult child to receive information to discuss what is going on with them at any particular time. So the HIPAA authorization is crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their condition, especially if they are not able to speak with you directly about their condition, or they cannot fully relay that medical information to you. Again, at a time of crisis, your primary concern is to ensure your child is taken care of. So you don't want the potential additional burden of those court proceedings and associated legal costs. You want to be able to have that HIPAA authorization in place and electronically send it and get information at a moment's notice. So I, of course, have a few different personal examples that I can speak to during the course of this presentation with my own children. My older child was at school, and I don't know if this will happen with you and your children, but he was starting to get sick, not feeling well. And I was urging him to go to University Health Services and get checked out. But for one reason or another, he couldn't go. He had a class, he had to study, he had a study group, he couldn't get the right time. So as the week went on, he became more ill. And on Saturday in the middle of the night, you never want to call in the middle of the night, I get a call that he's not feeling well. Don't worry, he's with his friend who's taking him to the emergency room. And he has his phone with him, but his phone is almost out of battery. And his friend has his phone, so his friend will text me and keep me updated. So of course, during those moments, I'm very anxious, waiting to hear. I don't hear for a while, finally get a text from his friend that says, we're at the hospital, we've been here, I can't get any information about what's going on. They won't tell me because I'm not authorized to receive that information. And by the way, your son's phone is all out of battery, so he can't reach you. So at this point, I called the nurse's station, I explained who I was, and the nurse said, we can't even tell you if your son was admitted without the proper authorization in place. So quickly, I had my electronic copies on my desktop where I keep them. I was able to send that electronic copy off. I then called back to the nurse station, and the nurse said, I'm so sorry, I couldn't speak with you before. Now that I have the correct documentation, I can tell you what's going on. So had I not had that HIPAA authorization in place, I would not have been able to find out what was going on. So again, this document's very important. Hopefully you don't need them, but if you do need them, I can tell you from personal experience, you want to have them where you can just immediately get information when needed.
So Karen discussed the healthcare directives, the healthcare power of attorney, and the HIPAA authorization. Now we're going to turn to the power of attorney for property. And the name is a little bit misleading because when you think of property, you might just think of real estate or land or a building, but think of property in the broader sense. So really anything having to do with financial matters is going to be covered by the power of attorney for property. And like Karen said, none of these documents, when we sit down with young adults, we make it very clear to them that nothing that they're signing is going to be a waiver of their rights. So by giving somebody power of attorney, you're not giving up your right to make your own decisions. It's just that the form becomes relevant if for some reason that young adult is either incapable or unavailable to make the decision themselves. So with the power of attorney for property, it's going to allow parents to manage their child's finances for them. It becomes critical if a child is injured or is ill and is unable to either temporarily or permanently make their own financial decisions. So if a bank account, a car, or any other assets are titled into the name of the young adult, the power of attorney for property is going to allow the family to avoid the expense and the drawn out court process of having to have somebody appointed as a guardian. So it enables somebody to act for them on financial matters. So if an adult child is not readily able to access their bank account or any other type of financial vehicle, and there's an issue, a parent is going to be able to step in, and or anyone who's named in the power of attorney as the agent is going to be able to step in and handle that for the young adult. So it can be used for things like dealing with a letter from the IRS or the Illinois Department of Revenue, handling things like dealing with bank accounts or brokerage accounts, dealing with things having to do with motor vehicles. So these are typical scenarios where perhaps you as a parent might need to step in and assist them with these types of matters. We do recommend when young adults come in that they make the power of attorney effective immediately. And the benefit to that is that not only can it be used if they're incapacitated, but it could also then be used for convenience purposes. Because let's say, despite the fact that the University of Illinois is a great place to be, they may want to study abroad junior year. So maybe they're not incapacitated, they're just not available. And this way, the power of attorney could be used to help them while they're traveling abroad and they're not available in the United States to handle their own financial business. So it becomes a very handy tool and one that I think becomes very useful for people. We have a question: does the power of attorney for property make parents responsible for student debts? So that's a great question. The answer to that is no. So when you're acting as an agent under a power of attorney, you don't take on any personal responsibility for the debts of the principal being the person who's creating the power of attorney, in this case, the young adult. So by being an agent under a power of attorney, you're not agreeing to be responsible for their student loan debt or any other debt or obligation that they may incur. So that's a great question, and thank you for pointing that out. Another thing that we put in our powers of attorney are the ability to get access to digital assets. So this is real important because everything is online these days. We don't even get bills in the mail anymore. Typically, you just get an email saying that your bill is due and you go online and you pay it. Well, we want there to be specific authority for an agent acting under a power of attorney to access those digital assets if they needed to. Now, we're big proponents of advising you as with your family to create perhaps an emergency password system or a password management system. There's apps for that and things. But if that were to fail or you didn't have it in place, then having the power of attorney, which will grant the agent access to things that are online, may be very helpful. So we're big proponents of that. This is also probably a good spot to point out that we utilize the Illinois statutory forms for the powers of attorney for healthcare and the power of attorney for property. So those forms are available online. However, when we do these for our clients, we add a lot of additional powers. So we customize them to a degree where they're more abundant in the powers that they're granting, because in Illinois, like many other states, if certain powers are not specifically provided for, then the agent may not be able to do them. And there are things that are lacking in the Illinois form that you do want to add. So this is something you could do yourself, but one of the benefits of using an attorney would be, having it perhaps customized and tailored more towards the needs that a young adult might have. Another question that we get, now it doesn't apply to this group because we're all University of Illinois parents and we're still in the state of Illinois. But let's say, after University of Illinois, someone decides to go to grad school out of state, or they decide to take a job in Texas or California. Will these documents still be good in those other states? And the answer is yes, they will be, as long as they're validly executed in Illinois. And of course, if you do this through Shire Law Group, we would make sure that they're validly executed. That would mean having proper witnesses and perhaps a notary, whatever the requirements would be for that specific form. As long as they're executed properly, they're going to be honored and usable in all 50 states. So no matter where your adult child winds up after graduation from the University of Illinois, they're going to be able to use this form. They might want to change it when they no longer want to have maybe you as the parents listed as their agent. Maybe they want to list their spouse or significant other. And of course, they have the right to do that at any time. This is the same answer, by the way, if there is anybody on this program who has a child who's going not to University of Illinois, but let's say a school that's out of state in Pennsylvania or in Wyoming or whatever, these forms would be good there as well. And we always recommend getting them done before, if you can, before your child leaves for school, because once they get there, they get kind of busy. Another good point to bring up here, you have to be 18 in order to sign these forms. So we do get a lot of clients that, I don't know why their parents do it to them, but they bring them in on their 18th birthday. So we have a little treat for them, but yes, you have to be 18. You cannot sign these documents or put them in place beforehand.
So these documents obviously provide peace of mind. They allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information should a crisis occur, so you can just focus on that situation. The documents are easy to be put in place, and they should be among the top of everybody's list when you're making lists as your children head off and as they turn 18. Those copies of documents should be kept in a safe and easily accessible place, and we highly recommend that when you do these documents, you keep them electronically.
So there is a question, can all of these forms be signed electronically? And the answer is yes. With COVID, certain protocols were put into place to allow us to do it on Zoom. So they can't actually be signed electronically. We do that. We basically have a Zoom meeting with the young adult. We go over the documents with them. They'll have the paper documents at their location. We either email them in advance or we send the hard copies through the mail. They get signed. There's a whole procedure where, we watch the signing and we see the signature, and then the documents get sent back to us for the witness and the notary. So it is done electronically via like a Zoom, but they're not signed electronically. We do that under the direction of the of the state of Illinois' directive relating to COVID. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation about our remote process in getting that done. So let me go ahead and mark that as done.
So one of the other limitations that a parent has once their child turns 18 is access to educational records. And that is governed by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FERPA. So the next chart demonstrates some of those differences before your child became a legal adult and after. So before 18, you could view your child's educational records, and after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper documentation in place. Before 18, you could request a correction to your child's educational records, and after 18, that right becomes limited again without that proper documentation in place. Before 18, you could decide who could see your child's educational records, and after 18, again, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. And before 18, you could get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. So there's a theme here. Proper authorization is written consent, and that written consent is the FERPA authorization form. So there's some misconceptions with FERPA. Sometimes our young adults and our parents believe that it's just having access to your young adults' grades at school. It's far more important than that. If your young adult was talking to an administrator at school and that administrator had some concerns about that conversation, they would be restricted in being able to share those concerns with you without having a FERPA authorization in place. So it's all educational records, just not grades. These get housed at the registrar's office. Sometimes schools might have their own FERPA authorization. Illinois may or may not. This coming year, you'd have to check. It switches from years to year, so we're not really sure at this point whether they will or they won't. We always do a backup FERPA authorization for all of our young adults, just so they're in place. Sometimes a school who does their own has additional things in their FERPA. They might say, you're agreeing to your likeness being taken for marketing purposes or for a phone number, email to be published. So if there is a individual FERPA form that is going to be set up and your student is not sure whether to sign it or not, we always say to our clients, send them to us and we'll take a look at them. But we always do that backup FERPA so it is in place. And again, it's at the registrar's office. So one thing on your list is to make sure that there is one in place and it is in their file at the registrar's office.
We have a couple of questions. If the child lives out of state going to Illinois, can you still prepare the forms? Yes, that would be fine. We would be able to do that for you. Just reach out to us and we could talk about how that would work. And then we have a question, does the healthcare power of attorney cover mental health issues?
It does refer to mental health as well in the power of attorney for healthcare.
And if there's an area of special concern, there is a separate mental health care directive as well available in Illinois. And we would be happy to include that in the preparation of documents as well, if required.
So we're going to cover those common concerns. We're going to touch on wills and trusts and access to digital assets. So Alan's going to discuss that for a bit. And then we're going to talk about dorm, apartment, and global insurance and health and safety apps.
So we do get the question, okay, so we're preparing powers of attorney, we're preparing healthcare directives, we're doing this FERPA form. Does my young adult need to have a will or a trust? And so let's take a look at that by first just briefly talking about what those documents are. So you may be familiar with what a will is. We've seen on TV. It's basically a document that when somebody passes away, they direct where their assets are going to be distributed to. So I can I am married. My will might say when I pass away, I'm leaving everything to my spouse, otherwise in equal shares to my children. So that might be what somebody has as a typical will if they're married that they would create. So it's the disposition of property at death. Let's contrast that to a trust. A will is only going to be effective at death. The powers of attorney and the healthcare directives that we talked about are only effective during lifetime. A trust is actually going to be effective upon signing. So it's effective during lifetime, and it's also going to be effective after death. So it's a little bit of a super document. So a trust can be used to plan for potential incapacity or disability, as well as planning for things for after death. But again, the question becomes, okay, that's great, but does my young adult need to have one or both of these documents in place? And of course, the answer is going to be, it depends, right? So if your young adult has their own wealth, their own significant amount of money in their own name, they may benefit from having a will or a trust. However, let's keep in mind that certain things will operate outside of a will or a trust. So if you have a joint bank account with your young adult and your young adult were to pass away, you would become the sole owner of that account by virtue of being a joint owner. The same thing if there is a payable on death designation. So if your young adult has an account, and let's say you are listed as the POD, or payable on death, to my mom or my dad, then that as well would operate outside of a will or a trust. So that would pass by virtue of the agreement that you have with the bank to pay out to the person that you designate. The same thing with anything that has a beneficiary designation. So if your child has a life insurance policy and you're listed as the beneficiary under the life insurance policy, if your young adult then passed away, the insurance company would pay the proceeds to you as the beneficiary pursuant to the contract that your adult child had with the insurance company. Same thing maybe with a retirement plan. So you can see that if an adult child's assets are limited to maybe a modest bank account that's a joint account with mom or dad, or they have a life insurance policy that has mom or dad listed as the beneficiaries, and that's all that they have, they probably don't need to do a will or a trust at this point. They may want to wait until they get married, or of course, when they start a family, that's a great time to have documents in place, if nothing else, to cover the issue of guardianship of a minor child, but then they could also handle the disposition of their assets at that time. So the answer to this question is it kind of depends. For most of our young adults, they don't do a will or a trust at this point in their life. They just want to make sure that they've got these urgent powers of attorney and healthcare directives taken care of. So those are typically the ones that are going to be covered. We do have a question here. If a child turns 18 in the middle of a school year, how soon do these authorizations need to be completed? So they can be completed once the child is 18, whether it's in the middle of the school year or not. If you're directing this question to FERPA, I think that depending on what high school they're going to, I think most of them kind of cover this when the child registers for their senior year. We know with our local high school here, that is the case. So having the FERPA form, immediately created in order to have it available for high school purposes may not be quite as urgent, but then when they go off to college, it's a different story. So you do want to have it in place for that. So if they're in college and they're turning 18, then what we recommend is that, when they turn 18, the FERPA form and the other forms get completed, and then you'll have all of that ready in case you ever need it for anything. So let me just clear that one out, and we'll go to the next slide. The other thing I just wanted to mention before I wrap up my discussion about wills and trusts is that this concept of digital assets. So the powers of attorney do handle the management of digital assets. So that's very important. And then if you are going to do a will or a trust, you want to make sure that that authority is also going to be mirrored in those documents as well, because you want to make sure that you have that access, even if a child were to pass away, because you may need to do things, after death in order to manage their estate. So if you are going to be doing a will or a trust, that's something that you may want to address as well.
So we're going to talk a little bit about insurance and dorm, apartment rental, and global insurance. So surprisingly, there are standalone insurance policies for dorm, apartment, and rental insurance that are relatively inexpensive. Your homeowner's insurance might also cover this, but sometimes the deductible on your homeowners is higher than the standalone policy cost. So just something to look into and see. We don't really advocate one company over another company. And it's just something to get you started thinking about it. If you think this would be something that you want to be interested in, just take a look, check your homeowners, check these standalone policies, and see if this makes sense for you and your family. So things happen. Insurance could be a very good idea. I can give you another personal example with my other child.
Note that all of the examples are Karen's
True.
children. My children are saints.
It is true.
They're just perfect. So.
They are all mine.
Just kidding.
Personal. I'm not making this up. I really have had to deal with these things in the past. The other example goes towards my other child who is actually at University of Illinois right now, getting her master's degree. Can't say enough things about the school. The program is just absolutely wonderful. And she did her undergrad in the middle of Pennsylvania, very, very cold. And, we had told both of our children before they went to school, make sure that you always keep your computer with you, because you don't like to think about it, but things happen and their whole world is on their computer, their notes, their schedules, everything. So they knew to always bring their computer with them. And my younger one had a favorite place in the library that she liked to study in. And in the middle of winter, she puts on her heavy coat and a backpack with a computer. She goes off to the library in her spot that she likes. And unlike how I had it when I was at school, I don't know about all of you, but I couldn't order up food to wherever I was, but she ordered up her food like so often they do now. And they brought lunch right to the library. So she left to get her Grubhub and she took her computer with her. So she did listen to that. And when she got back to her spot, her coat was gone. So somebody had taken her coat. She's very upset about this. It's the middle of winter. She doesn't have a coat, and she's just very upset that somebody would have taken something like that in the middle of, what she thought was a safe space. And we didn't tell her to take her coat with her everywhere. We weren't thinking that. We were just thinking about the computer. But fortunately, we had this dorm apartment and rental insurance. And all she had to do was file a police report. And within a week, she had a replacement coat, and the policy paid for itself, plus some. So these policies have different provisions to them. Some even cover, not only theft, but damage. So just see if this is something that would work with your family. Check them out, see what's out there. And if it makes sense, just something else to take a look at and put on your list. The medical ID app, we wanted to bring this to you this afternoon. This is something not just only for your young adult, but also for you, for your entire family. So if you have a Apple, you'll see on the home screen this icon, this white box with this red heart in the upper right. If you have a different type of smartphone, you can actually download a similar health app, which does the same thing. So the medical ID app allows first responders to bypass a lock screen. It doesn't matter whether it's a facial recognition or a numerical code, and get into whatever information you place in there. They're actually trained to look for it and do that. So if your child has an allergy to a food or an intolerance to a food or to a medication or a condition that would have to be known, it is a good idea to put that in the medical ID app. Again, we don't endorse if you use this, how you use it, but we wanted to bring awareness of this medical ID app to you because it is a great resource, especially if your child has any kind of condition that would have to be known should a first responder come upon a scene.
Or list of medications and other things that allergies you can put on.
Yep.
Great.
A lot of information you can put in there. Then the other question we get a lot is safety apps. Your child's going to school and safety apps are numerous. If you go on to the internet, there's a plethora of them. I mean, there's just so many. And the most important thing is that you vet them before you put them on your phone. We feel like the best idea is to ask trusted other individuals. Your children can ask their friends what they use. You can ask other parents. And again, you want to vet them. You want to look into them. You want to make sure that they're right for you, right for your family, right for your situation. So some of the safety apps I can share with you that I use, Life 360. I have you can track an Uber ride. You can track a walk. On some of those are the ones that I primarily use. Find My Friends is another one. And again, we don't endorse one over the other. These are just things that have given a little bit of peace of mind for us and for our young adults. And if this is something that also would do the same for you, just check out these different apps, see which ones make sense. And again, just make sure that you're looking into them before you download any.
My wife would obsessively follow my daughter at U of I to figure out where she was at all times. But it doesn't give you a photograph of what they're doing, but it just tells you where they're at. So, but of course, your young adult has to agree to be
Yes.
monitored. So
Yeah.
that's something. I'm sure if my daughter knew how much my wife was looking at that thing, she may have changed her mind about that. So anyway, we also want to just talk again briefly about planning remotely. So this was a question earlier. So we understand that as University of Illinois parents, you may not all be in the Lincolnshire area where we are. You may be scattered across Illinois, or we even have somebody we know that's maybe coming from out of state as well. So that's great. But this planning can be done remotely. So one of the things that was kind of I guess if there could say there's any benefit from COVID, was the ability to do things a little bit differently in the state of Illinois. So there is protocol out there. There's a whole procedure about how you would do this. But we do like, so if we have clients that are not local to us, we can actually do this via a Zoom meeting. We have our own system here where, by the way, to take the mystery, we charge $300 for this program. So the fee is $300 and we prepare all 4 documents: the healthcare power of attorney, the HIPAA authorization, the power of attorney for property, and the FERPA form. So these are forms that you can get online, and do yourself if you wish. But we do them, we kind of customize them and make them more relevant to a young adult. We spend about 30 or 40 minutes with the young adult going over the documents and explaining it to them before they sign it. And we also take care of the witnessing and the notary, so that's all done correctly. So it's a really nice, inexpensive way to kind of get these done and get them done correctly. But of course, you could always, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, which we do have people that we've run into that do that successfully, you can go online and find some of this information there as well. But we do have a portal. Your young adult would fill in the information, we would generate the documents, and then we would set up a Zoom meeting if we're doing this remotely. Of course, you're always welcome to come into our office here in Lincolnshire. But if you wanted to do it over Zoom, we would then get you guys the documents in advance. You'd have them in front of you. We'd walk you through everything on the screen, and then we would witness the signing and handle it that way. So it's a nice procedure.
Yeah, the other thing is we get a question a lot of times, as a parent, do I have to be there to sign anything? And the answer is no. Your adult child will be the only one who needs to sign these documents, is they're authorizing whoever they name to step in on their behalf. But if you'd like to be there, certainly we encourage parents to join in on that meeting as well.
And we had just got a question about our fee. Our fee is $300 for that program per student. So if you have twins, you're going to be in it for 600. So,
but you get double the documents.
Yes, exactly. So this is a great time to do it. So I know we're still in July. We're approaching August. I'm not sure what the start date is of U of I this fall, or late summer. But we know it's around the corner. So if your child is 18, you probably want to think about getting this done before they go off. Now, some people, their child may not turn 18 until they're already out at school. So then that could be done remotely. So we've done that where we've set everything up in advance, and then we wait till they're 18 and we do a remote signing through Zoom, while they're at University of Illinois. Or they could do it if they come home, for Thanksgiving or the holidays or something like that. So we're happy to work with you to get it done. This is our busy season for this, because there seems to be a scramble to get these documents done before people head off to school. So we can't, though, stress the importance of pre-planning as opposed to avoiding waiting for a crisis to happen. So you hope that when you do these documents, you put them in a drawer and you're never going to need them for anything. By the way, we also provide them for you electronically, so you have PDF copies, signed copies as well. But if something does happen, you really want to make sure that these are in place, because it's very difficult to, and much more expensive and time consuming to work with that situation if you don't have these documents in place. And we have some information that August 22nd is the first day of classes at U of I. So thank you for that information. So we're about a month away from school starting. So something to consider. if your adult child is 18 or turning 18 soon, you may want to take care of this.
So some of the most important gifts that you can give to your adult child is to protect them with that power of attorney for healthcare. So if they are unable to make their own decisions, who can step in? Who's authorized to step in on their behalf to make those? A HIPAA authorization, which is giving authorization to individuals named to receive medical information. That power of attorney for property to help out with financial affairs. The consent form, that FERPA form to access educational records, a will or a trust if that's advisable. Look into insurance if that's something that you think would be useful for your family. And if medical ID is something that you think would work well for your family, to utilize that as well as those safety apps. But again, make sure that you vet any apps before you download them.
So it looks like we have a question here. Thank you, everybody, by the way,
Thank you.
for attending our presentation. We do have a question. Does the HIPAA authorization have to be individualized to each medical provider? So when you go see a doctor, they have their own HIPAA form. What we're providing is more of a generic form that's geared to be utilized wherever it's needed, because your adult child may wind up in a medical facility that they didn't anticipate being in, and they might be in a condition where they're unable to sign a HIPAA, especially if they're wheeled into an emergency room somewhere. So we're big fans of having a standby emergency HIPAA all ready to go, and it's going to be generic in the sense that it's going to be universal where it can be used. And this way, if an adult child winds up in a medical facility that they didn't expect to be in, and you didn't expect them to be in, you'll have the form available. You'll be able, like Karen told her story about her son, you'll be able to email or fax that over to the medical provider, and then they'll be able to talk to you.
And by the way, not just at U of I, if your young adult is visiting somebody else in another college, they're in another state, this HIPAA authorization, like Alan said, is going to work in all those different states. We actually write that into our documents that these are intended to be valid in all states.
Another question here. If we wanted to use your services for these documents, do we call or email to set up an appointment? What would be the next steps? So yeah, reaching out to us via email is the best way to do it. And then we will go ahead and send you information on how to get started. It's very easy.
Very easy.
So thank you for asking that question. We can copy you on everything as well, as long as that's okay with your adult child. And because technically they're our client, you get to pay for it. So for New Jersey or any other state, yes, we can work with you. So let us contact us and let us know your situation. And we can, if they're attending the University of Illinois, we certainly can do that. If they're attending another college, we'll talk to you about that as well. No, and this is a good question. Are we a member of any legal or MetLife legal benefit plans? The answer is no. But we do provide, if you want, a detailed invoice that you could present for reimbursement. So we'll break down the forms. It will divide up that $300 between the 4 forms, and then you could submit that to your benefit plan, and they typically will provide some sort of reimbursement there. I'm not sure of the exact amount, but we are not members of any of the legal plans. The price of this service is fairly low, so we don't really feel a need to do that. But we have had people that have been successful with the plans that you're mentioning, being reimbursed either for the whole thing or at least a significant portion of it. But you should check with them first, of course. We can't make any guarantees in that regard. Do you know if completing these forms could be an educational expense for 529? It's a good question.
That's a great
I think
question.
the answer is no, because they're generally applicable to things other than relating to academics. So my guess would be that the answer to that question is a no, but I'll take a closer look and try to respond back to you with that answer. But my guess is the answer would be no. That's a great
question.
I know, like ancillary things like books and, but that's related to education. I think by having legal documents in place like powers of attorney, although they're, obviously we're presenting today that they're very important to have in place, I don't think they're directly related enough to the educational experience to count as an educational expense. So I'm 99% sure of that answer, but
We will look
we have
into
to
that though
have to
for you.
check that out for you. Looks like we have one more. Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. If you have any questions after the fact, because things always pop up, our information is right there. Please feel free to email or call us at any time. We're happy to answer it for you.
And we can say, both of us from personal experience, having children that just graduated from U of I or just about to graduate, it's fabulous. The programs are fabulous and phenomenal, and congratulations to all of you.
Yeah, it's a great school for those. Thank you guys for the nice comments. We really appreciate
Bring us
that.
some champagne
And
or
yeah, a big exciting school year coming up. So
Thank you,
so much.
everybody.
Take
Thanks.
care,
Don't
everybody.
hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much.